You step onto uneven cobblestones, still warm from the afternoon sun. The air carries the sharp tang of wood smoke, the metallic bite of river water, and the faint sweetness of fermenting grapes drifting from nearby cellars. Bells toll in overlapping waves, deep bronze from St. Peter's, higher and quicker from parish churches hidden among the rooftops. Hooves clatter past on Via della Lungara. A cartwheel catches in a rut and groans. Voices rise in Romanesco, sharp and quick, layered over the low rumble of distant hammers shaping travertine. The Tiber flows heavy and brown 50 paces away, its surface broken by the wakes of flat-bottomed barges loaded with marble blocks and wine casks. Dust swirls where a group of pilgrims in wide-brimmed hats shuffle toward Ponte Sant'Angelo, their rosaries clicking like dry seeds. Somewhere, a street vendor calls out, "Cacio e pepe, caldo!" and the scent of pecorino and cracked pepper cuts through the heavier odors of horse dung and damp wool. It is late summer, 1600. Rome is swollen with Jubilee pilgrims, swollen with pride, swollen with the weight of its own myth. The city pulses under the direct rule of Pope Clement VIII, whose coat of arms, 3 rising hills surmounted by a star, appears freshly painted on every public wall. Yet beneath the surface of processions and newly gilded facades, something strains. The population has doubled in a generation. Grain prices climb faster than wages. Malaria still claims lives each autumn. The grandeur you see is real, but it is also deliberate, a vast, expensive assertion that the city of the Caesars has been reborn as the capital of Christendom. You feel the tension in the air, the same tension that pulls the ropes of the enormous bells, celebration and warning sounding at once. You are not merely observing Rome in 1600, you are entering a carefully reconstructed version of it, built from every surviving fragment of evidence. Cartographers' plans from the years around 1590, those of Antonio Tempesta, Giovanni Maggi, and the earlier Noli-like surveys are cross-referenced with thousands of pages of notarial acts, papal bulls, building permits, and tax rolls preserved in the Vatican's secret archives and the Archivio di Stato. Archaeologists' reports on foundations beneath later Baroque palaces, ground-penetrating radar scans of buried streets, and dendrochronological dating of surviving roof timbers provide the vertical dimension. Fresco inventories, inventories of artists' workshops, guild ledgers, and the daily logs of the Congregazione del Buon Governo supply the colors, materials, and rhythms of daily maintenance. Even the smells and sounds are calibrated from contemporary medical treatises on miasma, travel accounts from Northern Europeans, and the occasional poetic aside in a Roman diarist's notebook. This reconstruction does not invent, it assembles. Where a building's exact footprint is uncertain, the most probable outline is chosen based on property boundaries recorded in the Catasto Urbano of 1600 to 1601. Where a street's width varied over decades, the average dimension from multiple sources is used. The result is not a fantasy of perfection, but a probable lived city, grander in places than surviving evidence suggests, meaner in others, and always more crowded and noisier than the modern visitor imagines. You walk through this Rome now, block by block, as if the intervening centuries have been peeled away. The dust on your boots is the same dust that settled on pilgrims in 1600. Later, when the journey ends, you will return to the present-day city that overlays it, seeing which stones endured, which vanished, and which lie forgotten beneath asphalt and gardens. For now, though, the past claims you entirely. You stand at the crest of the Janiculum Hill, looking east across the Tiber toward the heart of the city. Rome in 1600 spreads before you like an irregular oval, roughly 3 kilometers long and 2 wide, enclosed on most sides by the ancient Aurelian walls, still largely intact, though patched and crumbling in places. The walls trace a jagged perimeter, from Porta San Pancrazio behind you, curving north past Porta Septimiana, then east along the riverbank to Porta Portese, southward to Porta San Paolo, and completing the circuit via Porta Maggiore, Porta Salaria, and Porta Flaminia before returning west. Inside this ring, the inhabited area occupies perhaps half the space. Vast swathes remain open gardens, vineyards, orchards, and ruins overgrown with ivy and wild fig. The Tiber divides the city unevenly. On the left bank, west of the river, lie Trastevere and the Vatican enclave, both densely built yet distinct. Trastevere, a maze of narrow lanes and medieval towers. The Vatican, a rising complex of palaces, basilicas, and gardens, climbing toward the new dome of St. Peter's. On the right bank, the main urban core, 7 hills shape the layout. The Capitoline and Palatine rise closest to the river, their slopes crowded with noble residences and ancient fragments. Northward, the Pincian and Quirinal form a higher ridge lined with villas and monasteries. The Esquiline and Caelian extend southeast, studded with churches and convents. The Aventine, quieter and more residential, overlooks the southern marshes. Your journey will begin at the river's edge near Porta Portese, cross Ponte Sisto into the commercial core around Campo de Fiori, climb toward the Capitoline and the papal government buildings, then thread through the working-class rioni of Monte and Trevi, pause at the spiritual center of the Pantheon and Piazza Navona, descend into the shadowed alleys where the city's underbelly thrives, witness the pivotal shift already stirring, and finally stand in the same places as they appear today. The route follows the natural flow of pilgrims, merchants, and power, from gateway to center, from labor to liturgy, from visible glory to hidden strain. You descend the Janiculum slope and reach the river at Porta Portese just as the morning sun strikes the water. The gate stands open, its portcullis raised, admitting a steady stream of ox carts laden with vegetables from the Campagna, mules carrying panniers of fresh fish from Ostia, and barefoot porters balancing crates of lemons and oranges on their heads. The Tiber here is wide and sluggish, its banks reinforced with low stone revetments that crumble in places, exposing layers of ancient brick. Flat-bottomed navicelle, shallow barges, pole their way upstream from the sea, sails furled, decks piled with salt, timber from the Abruzzo forests, and barrels of Sicilian wine. Downstream, similar vessels unload at makeshift wooden quays, their crews shouting in dialects from Naples, Genoa, and Ancona. This is Rome's principal southern gateway for goods and people in 1600. Ponte Sisto, rebuilt only 30 years earlier under Sixtus IV, arches across the river a short distance north. Its 5 spans of warm travertine glow in the light, though the central pier still shows scars from the Great Flood of 1598. Pilgrims in dusty cloaks cross in both directions, some clutching indulgences, others begging alms from merchants who pause to toss coins. On the Trastevere side, warehouses line the left bank, long, low buildings of tufa and brick with wide doors open to the quay. Inside, laborers stack amphora of oil, sacks of grain from the papal granaries at Civitavecchia, and bolts of cloth imported from Florence and Venice. The air smells of tar, wet rope, rotting fish, and the faint incense wafting from a small chapel dedicated to the Madonna del Porto. Society layers itself visibly here. At the water's edge, day laborers, mostly young men from the Roman Campagna or southern provinces, unload cargo for a few baiocchi a day, their backs bent under burdens far heavier than their wages justify. Above them, on the raised walkway, fattori, agents in sober wool tunics, tally loads on wax tablets, while richer merchants in silk-lined mantles negotiate prices with ship captains. Guards in the livery of the papal galleys patrol the quays, halberds gleaming, watching for smugglers who might slip untaxed goods past the customs post. Women appear too, laundresses beating linen on flat stones at the riverbank,
fishwives hawking their catch in piercing voices, and a few veiled matrons supervising household servants who carry market baskets. Everyone moves with purpose. Idleness is a luxury few can afford in this gateway where the city meets the world. You cross Ponte Sisto on foot, the stone warm under your soles, and enter the dense commercial heart around Campo de Fiori. This open square, once a meadow, now serves as the city's principal marketplace by day and execution ground by night. Wooden stalls line the perimeter. Merchants hawk spices from the Levant, saffron, cinnamon, cloves, while others display bolts of damask, velvet, and watered silk imported via Genoa. The air is thick with the scents of roasted chestnuts, fresh bread from nearby fornaci, and the sharp vinegar tang of pickled vegetables. Money changes hands constantly. Gold scudis stamped with the Pope's profile, silver testoni, copper baiocchi clinking in leather pouches. Bankers from the Banchi quarter nearby, men of Florentine and Genoese origin, sit under portable tables under striped awnings, weighing coins on small scales and recording transactions in ledgers bound in vellum. Rising above the market are the true seats of power. To the north, the massive Palazzo Farnese dominates with its rusticated ground floor and orderly rows of windows. Michelangelo's cornice crowns it like a stone diadem. Nearby, Palazzo della Cancelleria, seat of the papal chancellery, stretches along Via del Pellegrino, its long facade pierced by arched windows that glow with candlelight even in daylight, as clerks copy bulls and briefs. The Capitoline Hill looms eastward, its ancient steps leading to the Palazzo dei Conservatori and the Palazzo Senatorio, where the city's magistrates still convene under the shadow of the papal authority. Fresh travertine gleams on new additions. Scaffolding hugs the sides of unfinished palazzi as masons chip away at blocks hauled from Tivoli quarries. Here, prosperity declares itself openly. Cardinals in scarlet silk ride past on mules caparisoned in velvet, attended by pages in livery. Noblewomen in closed litters, curtains drawn against dust, pass with the soft clink of rosary beads and the murmur of prayers. Yet tension coils beneath the surface. The cost of maintaining this splendor drains the papal treasury. Taxes on grain and meat rise yearly, squeezing merchants and artisans alike. Rumors circulate of Spanish pressure on Clement VIII to repay old loans, of French envoys maneuvering for influence, of cardinals building fortunes while parishes lack candles for mass. The grandeur is real, the authority absolute, but every new facade and every golded statue represents borrowed time and borrowed money. You sense the strain in the hurried pace of couriers, in the guarded expressions of bankers counting coins, in the way even the wealthiest glance toward the Vatican as if awaiting the next decree that could shift fortunes overnight.
You leave the clamor of Campo de Fiori and follow Via the Ubonari toward the Tiber again. But now the focus shifts to the unseen arteries that keep the city functioning. Rome in 1600 depends on an intricate, fragile system of water, waste, and movement that has evolved piecemeal since antiquity, yet still bears the imprint of imperial engineering. The Aqua Virgo, restored under Sixtus V only a decade earlier, delivers fresh water from springs 12 kilometers east. Its channel, partly underground, partly carried on low arches, empties into the Trevi fountain, still modest in 1600, but already the terminus for dozens of smaller public fountains scattered through the Rioni. Women and servants balance copper vessels on their heads, filling them at these spouts, while children splash in the overflow. The sound of falling water is constant background music in every neighborhood. Sewage moves differently. Open gutters run down the center of most streets, sloping toward the Tiber or toward low points where they join ancient cloacas still in use. Night soil collectors, known as acquaroli or more crudely as scaricatori, push handcarts through the alleys after dark,
scooping waste into barrels to be carried beyond the walls or dumped directly into the river. The stench is strongest in summer heat. Flies cloud the gutters, and residents burn rosemary and juniper to mask it. Streets themselves form the primary infrastructure. Narrow, winding, paved irregularly with basalt blocks salvaged from ancient roads. Rain turns them into slippery channels. Dust and dry months coats everything. Torchlight and occasional oil lamps provide the only illumination after sunset. Most movement ceases by the Ave Maria bell at dusk, unless a feast or procession demands otherwise. This system shapes every hour. Water dictates where laundries cluster near fountains, where brewers and bakers site their shops, where disease spreads fastest when the Tiber floods or summer fevers rise. The constant labor of maintenance, repairing aqueduct breaches, clearing blocked gutters, repaving ruts, employs hundreds of day laborers and keeps the city from choking on its own growth. Yet cracks already show. The population presses harder against the old limits. New construction blocks old channels. Papal funds prioritize churches and palaces over mundane repairs. Each fountain that runs dry, each gutter that overflows, foreshadows a future where the balance tips from managed abundance towards scarcity and breakdown. For now, the water still flows, the carts still roll, and the city breathes. But the effort required grows heavier with every passing year. You turn north from the commercial bustle and enter the Rione of Monti, one of Rome's oldest and most densely packed working-class districts. The streets narrow abruptly, barely wide enough for 2 mules to pass abreast, flanked by 4- and 5-story tenements of brick and tufa, their ground floors occupied by small workshops and taverns. Wooden balconies jut overhead, draped with drying laundry that flaps like flags in the faint breeze. The pavement here is worn smooth by centuries of feet. In places, ancient paving stones from the Subuha emerge where the modern layer has eroded. The air carries the mingled smells of baking bread, tanning leather, fermenting must from small household wine pressers, and the ever-present damp rot that seeps from walls never fully dry. Life presses close. Families of 6 or 8 crowd into single rooms 20 feet square, sharing a communal kitchen in the courtyard below if they are fortunate. Artisans work at street level. Blacksmiths hammer iron on portable anvils. Shoemakers stitch soles by candle stubs even in daylight. Weavers operate looms that clack rhythmically behind half-open shutters. Children dart between legs, chasing wooden hoops or begging scraps from passing servants. Women carry water from the nearest public fountain, often a modest spout fed by a branch of the Aquavirgo, balancing amphoras on padded head rings while infants are tied to their backs in cloth slings. Men returning from day labor at construction sites or in the fields beyond the walls walk with the slow gait of exhaustion, tools slung over shoulders, faces darkened by sun and dust. Inequality reveals itself without apology. A cardinal's palazzo rises at the end of one lane, its high garden wall topped with broken glass to deter thieves. Its shadow falls across a row of single-story hovels where families sleep on straw pallets. A noblewoman's carriage, escorted by armed retainers, forces pedestrians against the wall as it squeezes through. The driver cracks his whip to clear the way. Yet the district sustains its own order. Guilds regulate trades, bakers, butchers, masons, enforcing standards and mutual aid. Confraternities organize charity for widows and orphans, distribute bread during lean winters, and stage modest processions on saints' days. Neighbors share firewood, watch one another's children, and gather at corner shrines lit with oil lamps to recite the rosary at dusk. This density breeds both friction and resilience. Quarrels erupt quickly over spilled water or borrowed tools, but help arrives just as swiftly when fever strikes or a roof collapses in the next rain. This is the human-scale Rome where most residents live, not in gilded halls, but in these crowded, noisy, enduring streets that have changed little since the fall of the empire, yet now pulse with the energy of a city remaking itself under papal ambition. You emerge from the tight lanes of Monti into the wide, sunlit oval of Piazza della Rotonda. The Pantheon stands before you, its massive portico of granite columns unchanged since Hadrian's time, though the bronze doors gleam with fresh polish, and the pediment above carries the inscription of Agrippa restored under Clement VIII. Inside, the oculus admits a perfect circle of sky. Light shifts slowly across the marble floor, catching flecks of gold in the coffered dome. Pilgrims kneel at the altar dedicated to the Virgin and martyrs. Their murmured prayers blend with the soft echo of footsteps and the drip of water from a small fountain in the portico. Outside, the square serves as both marketplace and gathering place. Vendors sell rosaries carved from olive wood, printed indulgences, and small lead medals stamped with saints' images. A Franciscan friar preaches from a wooden platform near the fountain, his voice rising and falling in rhythmic Latin cadences, while listeners toss coins into his bowl. This is Rome's enduring spiritual anchor in 1600. The Pantheon, reconsecrated as Santa Maria ad Martires in the 7th century, remains the city's most intact ancient monument and a living place of worship. Nearby churches, San Luigi de Francesis, San Agustino, Santa Maria sobre Minerva, form a constellation of devotion, each drawing specific communities: French expatriates, Augustinian scholars, Dominican preachers. Processions wind through these streets daily. Confraternities carry painted banners and relics on feast days, their members chanting litanies in unison. Belief infuses every corner. Votive candles burn in wall niches, small madoneles, street shrines, receive fresh flowers each morning, and the Angelus bell at noon stills conversations citywide as heads bow briefly.
The spiritual life binds the disparate population. Nobles endow chapels and chaplains. Artisans join lay brotherhoods that guarantee burial and prayers for the dead. Even the poorest find solace in the public oratories where Mass is said in the open air. Identity here is communal and sacramental. Romanesco, spoken in the streets, merges with Latin in the churches, creating a shared language of faith that transcends class. Yet the anchor holds firm against the pressures of growth and politics. The Pope himself processes to these basilicas on major feasts, reinforcing the link between temporal power and eternal truth. As you stand beneath the dome's vast eye, the city's noise fades to a distant hum, replaced by the quiet certainty that this place has outlasted empires and will outlast the ambitions of any single pontiff. The faith expressed here is both personal devotion and public spectacle, the thread that weaves the crowded, unequal city into something resembling unity. You slip away from the open light of Piazza della Rotonda into the shadowed network of alleys behind Piazza Navona, where the city's underlayer reveals itself without pretense. These narrow passages, some no wider than outstretched arms, run between the backs of noble palazzi and the fronts of tenements, their walls stained with centuries of soot and seepage. The ground here is perpetually damp. Runoff from upper streets collects in shallow ruts, carrying the sour reek of urine and the metallic scent of blood from nearby butcher's shops. Lanterns hang infrequently, their weak flames guttering in drafts that carry the low moans of fever patients behind closed shutters. Disease moves freely in these quarters. Malaria, called terzana for its 3-day cycle, rises each summer from the stagnant pools near the Tiber and the undrained marshes south of the Aventine. Ague shakes entire households, leaving survivors gaunt and yellow-eyed. Plague has not struck since the 1656 outbreak still lies in living memory, but quarantines and rumors keep fear sharp. Smallpox scars mark faces young and old. Syphilis spreads through the crowded inns and brothels clustered near Via dei Giubonari and the Campo Marzio. Physicians in black robes visit the wealthy. The poor rely on barber surgeons who bleed patients with dull lancets or apply poultices of dubious herbs.
Exploitation threads through daily survival. Landlords, often absentee clerics or minor nobles, extract high rents for crumbling rooms, evicting tenants who fall behind with little notice. Day laborers wait at dawn in makeshift piazzas for contractors to hire them for papal projects or private building. Many return home empty-handed, wages unpaid or reduced on pretexts. Women work as spinners, laundresses, or domestic servants in noble houses, their pay barely covering bread. Some turn to prostitution in the regulated Casse Chiuse near the river, where papal guards collect protection fees. Beggars, maimed veterans, widows, orphans cluster at church doors, their pleas mingling with the clink of coins tossed by the pious. Thieves operate in small bands, lifting purses in markets or climbing walls to steal laundry. The Bargello's men patrol sporadically, but corruption ensures many escape justice for a bribe. Political suppression simmers beneath the surface. The Inquisition maintains its prison in the Palazzo del Sant'Uffizio near the Vatican. Suspected heretics, mostly minor intellectuals or foreign visitors, disappear for questioning, their cases handled in secret. Pamphlets criticizing papal policy or Spanish influence circulate clandestinely, passed hand to hand in taverns before being burned. Informers listen in on wine shops. A careless word about simony or nepotism can lead to arrest. Yet resistance persists quietly. Anonymous graffiti on walls, satirical verses sung in dialect, small acts of defiance against taxes or forced labor. This shadow layer does not dominate the city's life. It coexists with the processions, markets, and masses, but it is inseparable from it. The same streets that host jubilant feasts also shelter hunger, illness, resentment, and the constant low-grade violence of a metropolis straining under its own weight and the weight of absolute rule.
You stand at the edge of Piazza Navona as dusk settles, the fountain's water catching the last copper light while torches flare along the colonnades. The year is still 1600, but the city feels poised on the brink of irreversible change. Clement VIII's pontificate, now in its final months, has been a high watermark of papal authority. Jubilee crowds, architectural commissions, diplomatic triumphs over France and Spain. Yet the forces that will soon fracture this equilibrium are already gathering. The Pope's health declines visibly. Rumors spread through the taverns that his dropsy worsens, that the cardinals circle like hawks awaiting the conclave. His nephew, Cardinal Aldobrandini, oversees vast patronage networks, but resentment simmers among rival families excluded from the spoils. Beyond the Vatican walls, larger shifts press inward. The 30 Years' War lies only 2 decades ahead, but its prelude, religious wars in France, the Dutch revolt, the tightening grip of Habsburg Spain on Italian affairs, already strain papal finances. The cost of maintaining armies to protect the papal states, subsidizing Catholic allies, and funding lavish building projects drains the Camera Apostolica faster than new revenues can refill it. Indulgences sold during the Jubilee bring temporary windfalls, but the practice draws quiet criticism even within the Curia. Meanwhile, the Protestant North grows bolder. Printed broadsheets smuggled from Venice and Geneva mock Roman superstitions, while Jesuit missionaries report hardening resistance in Germany and Scandinavia. Closer to home, the city's physical expansion collides with its limits. New streets are laid out beyond the old walls, villas rise on the Pincian and Aventine slopes, but the core remains overcrowded. The Tiber still floods disastrously every few years, and malaria claims more lives each autumn. The papacy's response, grand urban interventions under Sixtus V and his successors, has straightened avenues, erected obelisks, and connected basilicas, yet these projects prioritize spectacle over sanitation or housing.
Artisans and laborers feel the squeeze. Wages stagnate while grain prices climb, forcing more families into debt or migration. The turning point crystallizes not in one dramatic event, but in the succession itself. When Clement dies in March 1605, the brief pontificate of Leo XI, only 26 days, and then the election of Paul V Borghese mark the shift toward a more absolutist Baroque style of rule. Paul V will accelerate nepotism. His nephew Scipione Borghese amasses one of the greatest art collections in history, while tightening control over the city through new taxes, stricter censorship, and expanded papal police. The exuberant confidence of 1600 begins to harden into defensiveness. The Jubilee's open welcome gives way to guarded suspicion of foreigners and ideas. The Rome you have walked, vibrant, crowded, triumphant, starts its slow transformation into the more controlled, monumental city of the 17th century. The bells toll the hour. Tomorrow the cardinals will gather again, and with them, the next chapter in the city's long reinvention.
You return to the same coordinates 4 centuries later, standing once more beneath the Pantheon's portico in what is now called Piazza della Rotonda. The granite columns still rise 16 meters, their surfaces weathered but intact. The bronze doors, recast after medieval thefts, open to the same vast circular space where light pours through the oculus onto the marble floor. The building endures as Santa Maria ad Martires, its function preserved while the surrounding city has transformed. The square itself is larger now, medieval structures cleared in the 19th century, paved with smooth travertine and ringed by cafes whose tables spill into the open space. Tourists with cameras and guidebooks replace the vendors of rosaries and indulgences. The fountain Bernini designed for Piazza Navona stands a short walk away, its 4 river statues gleaming under floodlights after dark. Much has vanished. The dense tenements of Monti have been gutted and rebuilt. Only fragments of medieval walls and ancient brick courses survive in basements or incorporated into later facades. The open gutters that once carried sewage down every street are buried beneath modern sewers. The Tiber's banks, once crowded with quays and warehouses, are now lined with embankments and roads that prevent the catastrophic floods of the past. Campo de' Fiori remains a market by day, its central statue of Giordano Bruno, a later addition, marking the spot where executions once took place. But the wooden stalls now sell flowers, spices, and tourist trinkets, rather than the raw commerce of 1600. The great palazzi, Farnese, Cancelleria, still stand, repurposed as embassies or government offices, their courtyards quiet where once clerks and couriers hurried. The Vatican enclave has expanded dramatically. St. Peter's Dome, completed under Paul V, dominates the skyline as it did not fully in 1600. Bernini's colonnes embrace the square that was then an irregular field approached by narrow streets. The Aurelian walls persist in long stretches, though breached and restored many times. Gates like Porta Portese and Porta Maggiore remain, now traffic arteries rather than guarded thresholds. The working-class districts have migrated outward. The historic center, once home to artisans and laborers, is gentrified. Shops sell luxury goods. Apartments command prices unimaginable to the families who once crowded the upper floors. What lies buried is perhaps most striking. Layers of fill and construction have raised street levels by meters in places. Roman pavement, medieval alleys, and Renaissance foundations sleep beneath asphalt and foundations. Ground-penetrating radar reveals forgotten cloacae, collapsed insulae, and the outlines of vanished churches swallowed by later building. The Tiber itself has been tamed,
canalized, bridged with modern spans, its ancient character as both lifeline and threat largely erased. Yet echoes persist. The rhythm of bells still marks the hours, processions still wind through certain streets on feast days, and the sense of layered time remains palpable when one pauses in a quiet courtyard or beneath an ancient arch. Rome in the present is both a palimpsest and a living city. The vanished world of 1600 is not gone, but compressed, its stones reused, its spaces reshaped, its spirit enduring in fragments that reward the attentive eye.
Rome in 1600 exists now only in the mind's reconstruction and in the stones that have endured. What you have walked through was neither idealized nor condemned. It was a living metropolis, ambitious, devout, unequal, resilient, shaped by the collision of ancient inheritance and counter-Reformation zeal. The city's grandeur masked its strains, its faith sustained its people through hardship, and its power rested on a delicate balance of spectacle, coercion, and belief. 4 centuries later, the same ground supports a different Rome, quieter in its daily rhythms, wealthier in material terms, yet still layered with the echoes of every preceding era. The act of looking back reminds us that no city is ever finished. Each generation builds upon, demolishes, or simply forgets the work of the last. The tension you felt in 1600, the pull between celebration and warning, reappears in every age, though the forms change. Today's Rome carries forward fragments of that world. A fountain still fed by an aqueduct, a street that follows an ancient line, a bell that tolls the same hour. These survivals are not accidents, they are choices, preserved because someone decided the past mattered. History is not a closed book, but an invitation to see the present more clearly. The vanished world of the Papal Empire in 1600 stands as one chapter in an unbroken sequence. Tomorrow, another reconstruction can begin. Another city, another year, another layer peeled back to reveal what time has hidden and what it has kept.